For months, many warned that Israel's unrestrained assault on Gaza was not merely a crime against Palestinians, but a fatal blow to the very idea of international law itself. What was being tested was not only the scale of Israeli violence, it was something far more dangerous: whether rules still mattered at all, whether power would remain constrained by law, or whether law would simply give way to brute force. Those warnings were dismissed as exaggeration. They were not. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, put it plainly: the choice before the world, he said, was stark and unforgiving. Either defend the legal principles meant to prevent war, or watch the international system collapse under the weight of unchecked power politics. For billions in the global south, international law is not an abstraction. It is a shield. Remove it and only predators remain. He was right. Gaza was the opening act, not an aberration, not a lapse, but the moment a long gestating doctrine finally shed all restraint. Over more than 2 years, international law was not merely violated, it was rendered meaningless, trampled alongside the bodies of children, doctors, journalists and patients, bombed in their homes, bombed in their hospitals and their schools, entire neighborhoods erased, families buried under rubble, healthcare systematically dismantled. And none of this happened in secret. It happened in full view of the world. The world persuaded itself that the collapse of law could be contained, that Gaza could be treated as an exception, that the devaluation of human life would have no consequences. It could not. There's something grotesque about watching Germany and Europe suddenly rediscover international law when Trump speaks of annexing Greenland. The very government that spent months shredding legal norms, supplying weapons, refusing accountability while Gaza was pulverized, now speak gravely of sovereignty, order, and unrestrained power. And listen to Trump's justification: if we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will. That logic should sound familiar. It's the same logic spoken by a settler from New York standing in the garden of a Palestinian woman in occupied East Jerusalem. When Muna el-Kurd confronted him, "You are stealing my house," his reply was chilling in its crude simplicity: "If I don't steal it, somebody else will." Theft justified as inevitability. The settler colonial mentality laid bare, whether it's a family home in Sheikh Jarrah or an island in the Arctic. Having under genocide, having watched hospitals bombed and children buried without consequence, Europe now clutches its pearls at the prospect of borders being ignored so long as those borders are European. Gaza marked the moment American-backed power stopped even pretending to obey international norms and began operating openly as domination imposed by force. The US has intervened violently across Latin America and the global south for over a century. Coups, invasions, sanctions, proxy wars, assassinations. What distinguishes the Trump era is not how often it intervenes, but how openly, how brazenly. Where earlier administrations wrapped destruction in the language of democracy or humanitarianism, Trump dispenses with the mask entirely. Control is not justified, it is asserted. This is the revived distorted Monroe or Don Roe doctrine, a license to intervene violently, to seize resources, to exclude rivals by force. Venezuela is not the destination of this doctrine, it is the demonstration. Trump has made clear it doesn't end there. Cuba, Mexico, already signaled as next. Nowhere is this clearer than in the plan imposed on Caracas. The US will control Venezuelan oil sales indefinitely, control the revenue, dictate the terms of survival. Venezuela will not even be free to trade as it chooses, forced to buy American goods only, at American prices. This is not aid, it's expropriation, and we have seen this before. In Iraq, sanctions devastated the country, killing hundreds of thousands of children. Only then came the Oil for Food program, a UN-supervised system that allowed Iraq to sell oil to buy food and medicine under strict international control. It was deeply flawed, corrupt, humiliating. But even then, Iraq could sell its oil on global markets and buy goods from multiple countries. What's being imposed on Venezuela today is even worse. No UN oversight, no multilateral framework, no freedom of trade. The US alone controls the oil, the revenue, and the conditions of survival. And this did not emerge in a vacuum. Venezuela has been under US sanctions for nearly 2 decades, intensified, escalated, tightened into something resembling a blockade, and the result? Economic devastation, millions forced to flee a country with the largest proven oil reserves on earth. This collapse was not accidental, it was engineered. And the lineage is not new. Britain crushed India's textile industry and turned a producer into a captive market, protecting British mills while flooding India with cheap machine-made cloth. Britain went to war so China would buy what it did not want: opium. Different centuries, different continents, same logic. But even 19th century empires cloaked conquest in the language of civilization, of la mission civilisatrice. Trump seeks no such legitimacy. Domination is justified by power alone. And history teaches us something else. Imperial violence abroad always returns home. The killing of Renee Nicole Good by ICE, followed by the denial of medical aid, shatters the illusion that this system targets only distant populations. The parallels with Israeli practices in Gaza and the West Bank are unmistakable. Extrajudicial force, total impunity, terror as a tool of obedience. US and Israeli security forces share training, surveillance, repression. What was tested on Palestinians now being normalized elsewhere. Gaza was the graveyard of international law, and the grave was dug by those who now lament its disappearance, by governments that armed the killing, shielded the perpetrators as schools burned and children were pulled from rubble. Those who now recoil are staring at a monster of their own making, like Frankenstein, horrified by what he assembled piece by piece. This is the age of open thuggery.